interpret the issue of optimal capital structure when comparing it to Sukuk issuance. And I'll explain that as we go along very quickly. So in order to achieve the objectives and answer the research questions, we've looked at the literature from 4 angles. One, we've compared Sukuk with conventional bonds. Then we've looked at the announcement effects comparison between conventional and Sukuk. And then we've looked at the underlying structure according to the IOFI and the Sharia Advisory Council resolutions of Bank Negara Malaysia. And finally, we've looked at the literature of Sukuk and optimal capital structure. So we come to the issue of conventional bonds because that's our frame of reference, unfortunately. It's our frame of reference for determining whether Sukuk create value or not. Now, the literature on conventional bonds indicate that if you lump all types of conventional bonds together and you want to investigate whether shareholder value increases, you will be pretty much confused because the results are inconclusive. But when you separate the bonds into debt-based, pure debt straight bonds and convertible debt bonds, convertible equity bonds, now you will find a clearer result. For pure straight bonds, there isn't any serious market impact, meaning the market perception of a straight bond issuance is neutral, no impact. But when it is a convertible bond announcement, then you will see a negative impact on share price. That's what the literature indicates. Now, interestingly, Sukuk have been tested before in previous studies, and there are only 11 studies on Sukuk wealth effects. They've been tested as one type of Sukuk, except for a paper or 2 on individual contracts. No one actually tests whether debt-based Sukuk will provide the same results as equity-based Sukuk. So if we look at it, debt-based Sukuk can be classified based on the underlying structure, the underlying contract. Murabaha, Ijara, Salam, Istisna, that would be your debt-based Sukuk. But Mudaraba and Musharaka, on the other hand, and Wakala and Al-Istithmar will all fall under your equity-based Sukuk. So all we did was, we determined whether those types of Sukuk, the 2 categories, debt and equity-based Sukuk, will create different firm value post-crisis. Now, unfortunately, when you look at the previous literature, there are certain issues that were not addressed particularly. Now, those research gaps actually hanker around the crisis period. You know, the financial crisis? You'd find that Sukuk wealth effect studies go past the financial crisis as if it didn't occur. Now, naturally, we know that investors change behavior when it comes to financial crisis. Immediately, they move towards, or they prefer liquidity, and there's a liquidity risk premium. But that's not tested in previous studies. So we decided that we'll demarcate or determine that crisis period and test only after crisis period. So we test within a consistent time period. Then we found that research does not look at Sukuk type. And then research focuses on Malaysia or multi-country studies that provide a result based on the Sukuk market as a whole. Now that can be quite confusing because every economy, every market reacts differently to different issuances. Markets like Malaysia would react differently or incorporate news maybe semi-efficiently as compared to the US or the UK. So lumping all countries together and providing a Sukuk market wealth effect might not be that accurate. And then the crisis periods, for those that did consider it, actually did not consider the same crisis periods. Some said 2008, 2009, others said 2009, 2010. We were safe, we went from 2011 to 2015. And then we filtered through with the data because other research tends to use tranches, you know, Sukuk tranches rather than Sukuk programs. And that can be quite problematic because there's a dilution factor. When the tranche is issued, the investor already knows that the program has been announced 2 years ago. So naturally, the share price is not affected as much. We've looked at programs when the first announcement was introduced into the market. We've got 24 listed companies, 24 sukuk events over 5 years. We've used standard event study methodology, the market model, Sharpe's market model, but with a twist. We've applied the Scholes and Williams adjustment for non-synchronous trading in Malaysia. We've also applied a fairly new Kolari-Pinanen cross-correlation adjustment, just to ensure that our data is as robust as possible. And then we calculated for abnormal returns. That was for the first research question, and you'd remember that's about the announcement effect on shareholder value. And the second issue, optimal capital structure, was very easy. All we did was we physically analyzed corporate issuers' financial statements to determine how they disclose it in their accounting, in their financial statements. And I'll give you the results just now. So we have abnormal returns for the debt-based sukuk and equity-based sukuk. Instead of running through those numbers, I'm going to show you a picture. It's much easier to read it off a picture. If you look at the picture, you realize that we're depicting 3 types here. Obviously, it's the debt-based sukuk, which is what you see in the yellow. The gray is the equity-based sukuk, and in red, it's the total sample. Now, the results are quite surprising, because we conducted a test prior to the crisis as well. And we found that in Malaysia, markets respond differently to debt-based and equity-based sukuk. For debt-based sukuk, they react positively. But for equity-based sukuk, they react negatively. Very similar to your convertible bond versus your straight bond. But post-crisis, things change drastically. There's no net impact. Not for debt-based sukuk, not for equity-based sukuk. So what's happened? And we're going to look at that. The market now considers all sukuk issued in Malaysia, irrespective of the underlying structure, as they would perceive straight, pure debt bonds. And that is quite a different perception to what was prior to the crisis, which means that from all the literature previously that claims that sukuk are innovative structures that are a separate asset class, well, the market doesn't perceive it as such. So post-crisis in Malaysia, the market now sees it as a debt, simply as a debt. So what's happened? What happened? Was it the crisis that influenced it, perhaps? Perhaps investors have become more conservative after crisis, so now they look at a debt issuance without much excitement, so they don't react. But we're suggesting there's another reason for that. We've tested Saudi Arabia, and of course that's not in the paper, but the results are very different. So we suggest that Sheikh Osmani's statements in 2007 and the subsequent IOFI resolutions of 2008 had an impact on the Malaysian market as well. Although Malaysia likes to see itself governed by the Bank Negara Malaysia Sharia Advisory Resolutions, SAC resolutions, who were consistent in their approach. They didn't change their approach after Mufti Taqi's statements. You see, Mufti Taqi stated 85% of sukuk are impermissible. I'm sure that you know of the statement. But then the market changed in the Middle East. Equity-based sukuk became more equity-based. But in Malaysia, nothing changed. So this is not a Sharia paper. This is a market perception paper, market behavior. And the market says, it seems, that look, you haven't changed the way you do business in terms of your sukuk issuance, so we will not recognize it anything more than a debt. So we're suggesting and we're recommending that potential policy change be considered. We're not debating the issue of Sharia compliance and saying that Malaysian sukuk are not Sharia compliant. We're saying the market perceives it as not Sharia compliant, and that's a big difference. For the second finding, it's also quite pertinent because previous researchers assumed that when a company issues a debt-based sukuk, then that will increase the debt side of a leverage calculation. But when they issue an equity-based sukuk, it will increase the equity side. That means reduce overall leverage. But when we analyze the books of the issuers, there's no difference between debt and equity-based sukuk. They account for it in exactly the same way, as a debt, as a liability. So in a leverage calculation, irrespective of debt or equity-based sukuk, they are always accounted for as debt. So if you're considering optimal capital structure studies, then you have to consider the fact that all sukuk, irrespective of the type, are currently all accounted for as debt in the financial statements of corporates. So how can you actually look towards a conclusion of optimal capital structure then, if they're all debt? Of course, this is supported by our previous findings, because you saw no net wealth effect. It's treated as a debt in the accounting statements, and it's perceived as a debt by the market, by the investors. So there are issues in terms of negative connotations, in terms of perception, but there's also a positive. For those corporates that are not sensitive or are indifferent towards Sharia, we have many corporates that are not Sharia compliant corporates. They want to raise funds using alternative instruments. So they would probably be more attracted to a sukuk issuance because they have tax incentives from Malaysia. They are regarded, or they regard them as some exotic structures and different to the norm. And of course, Malaysia promotes the issuance of sukuk. So there are a number of advantages issuing sukuk in Malaysia. But we're saying it's not the traditional Sharia compliance that you might have perceived. So in summary, is market reaction to post-crisis sukuk announcement affected by underlying structure? You know, those exotic structures you see. Does it make an investor more excited and share prices go up? We're saying no. The results say no. Does the market perceive sukuk to be a separate asset class in Malaysia? Post-crisis, unfortunately, no. Are sukuk disclosed according to the underlying structure? No. So that's an interesting finding as well. So we suggest that when you look at financial innovation, and we know that this forum, this conference is about financial innovation, the clamor towards financial innovation cannot be an end in itself. Because we all admit that sukuk exotic structures are so amazing in terms of the underlying structures and how they put them together. We have vaccination sukuk, we have green sukuk, we have future SRI sukuk about to be released. But financial innovation is not an end in itself. Only when it increases firm value, now it is value adding. Before that, what did you achieve? Except perhaps extending the parameters, moving towards the Sharia parameters or beyond them. That's what you've done. Yes, the advantage is you've increased the options in the Islamic capital market, but overall, have you increased shareholder value? The results say you have not. That is the summary of the paper. We could delve into a whole lot of detail, however the time does not permit. And of course, questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ziad. Very interesting paper. I hope that we have some few minutes for questions later, not now. But please, just to follow the instruction of Dr. Ishrat, I think this is the policy implication from this paper really relates to SAC. As it turns out, opposite to what we had this morning by Dr. Saad saying that borrowers are naive, investors appear not to be naive. They seem to be quite informed, be able to differentiate a truly Islamic sukuk versus one that is only apparently Islamic sukuk. Basically because probably the investor knows that these are all basically benchmarked to interest rate. So I don't know who's taking notes for tomorrow for conclusion of this session. So Dr. Ziad's paper is quite important in terms of finding that basically investors are smart enough to differentiate between the real and the apparent one. Thank you very much. Now we turn the floor to Sayyida, please.
Thank you, Prof. Assalamu alaikum. Benjamin Franklin once said, "When the wells dry up, we learn the worth of water." Do we value our water resources? Can our water dry up? When we look at our beautiful blue planet, we assume that water is in abundance because 70% of of the planet is covered with it. But in reality, only 1% of this water can be consumed and used for irrigation purposes. And currently, 1.6 billion people live in countries and regions that are in absolute water scarcity. And the number is expected to increase to 2.8 billion by 2025. Now, a study by the World Resources Institute listed 33 top water-stressed countries in the world. And 78% of the countries are Muslim countries, Pakistan being one of them. Overconsumption, increasing demands for water, and extreme droughts have caused many rivers and lakes to dry up. And it's a common trend that rising temperatures and extreme droughts are happening in these places. So climate change is an important factor, and world leaders are taking note, as it was witnessed at the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris last year. The World Economic Forum's Global Risk 2015 report stated that global water crises are the next biggest threat facing the planet over the next decade. And for the first time, water was placed at the top as the most impactful risk to economies, environments, and people. So with all this happening around the world, you would think that water would be valued and conserved, right? Well, not quite. 32 billion cubic meters of treated water is lost around the world each year through leaks in pipes. Now, if you only reduce this by half, you can serve 90 million people and actually gain 2.9 billion without the necessity to build more dams. Now, the main reason for these leaks is the aging infrastructure. Thames Water, a utility in London, has spent around 11 billion pounds so far, and they will be spending more. In the US, you need around 91 billion to maintain and upgrade their water systems, but they only got funding for 36 billion. So there is a financing gap. Traditionally, funding for these water systems comes from three T's, which is tariffs. We as consumers pay for the services rendered, and taxes. As taxpayers, we also pay for these infrastructure improvements. And third, transfers, which is assistance from other countries and organizations. But these are not enough for the industry. So we need private funding to bridge this financing gap. A common terminology for the water that is lost is non-revenue water. So water can be lost through physical leaks, through pipes, or through water theft, or when you don't install meters to bill the customers. Now, why are these leaks not repaired? Most of the expenditure is concentrated on meeting increasing water demand. So governments tend to build more dams and water tunnels or aqueducts. So operational budget is reduced for maintenance. So the NRW increases and revenue decreases, and operational costs increases. Another reason for this is full value of water is not recognized. The tariffs are low and the water operators are not self-sufficient. And the indirect benefits to health, economic growth, and environmental quality are not recognized. I found this article published in the Express Tribune in May this year. The Pakistan Council of Research in Water Resources has warned that the country will approach absolute water scarcity by 2025 if measures are not taken. The NRW in Pakistan ranges from 30 to 60%. And an interesting point is that in Islamabad, there are no meters installed. So that means when a household which has probably maybe 6 bathrooms and a swimming pool pays the same rate as another household with just one bathroom. The reasons cited for this NRW is water theft, aging infrastructure, and system leakage. Malaysia is not considered a water-stressed country. The rainfall in 2014 was at 951 million cubic meters, and the consumption of treated water only 3.7 cubic meters. But ironically, we had a water crisis that year. Companies like Nestle suffered 15 million ringgit in losses every day for the 2 months of crisis. The water crisis occurred again this year in April. So as you can see here, this is the Bukit Merah Dam in Perak, which became completely dry. The months-long heat wave was attributed to El Nino. The heat waves are becoming longer and hotter. So every time when it stops raining, our dams run dry and water is rationed. Our NRW is at 38% at average, and it can reach to 56% in some states. So in this study, the approach used was to convert the NRW into financial values and deduct it with the cost of repairing the leaks. So the main objective is to provide evidence that repairing the leaks and saving the amount of water which is lost makes financial sense. The results indicated the additional water saved after deducting the repair was at 2.1 billion for the year 2014, and the cost was only 286 million. So by reducing these losses, water can be supplied to 26.8 million people without extracting more water and without stressing the water sources. In the case of Pakistan, more emphasis should be on the installing of the water meters. Green bonds have emerged as a new form of environmental financing and has risen rapidly to 37 billion issuance in 2014 with issuers even from the World Bank. Now, green sukuks have gained momentum with the issuance, mostly in renewable energy sectors, but not in the water sector. In the Malaysian sector, the main players are the National Water Services Commission, which is SPAN, the State Water Corporation, and the State Water Regulators, and PAB, the National Water Asset Holding Company. So this is the proposed structure, a Wakala Ijara Sukuk structure. So the PAB incorporates an SPV. The SPV issues the sukuk with water rights as the underlying asset. SPAN is declared as a guarantor. As a Wakala agreement, the SPV hires the water operators as a wakil to undertake the oversight of the NRW contractors. The Ijara agreement, the SPV hires the contractors to perform the NRW work. The water operators collect all the revenue gained from the NRW loss reduction and pay PAB. PAB collects the certain percentage for the water rights and then transfers the remainder of the revenue to the SPV, who in turn pays the investors. As a conclusion, water scarcity is something that will be faced by most countries, and conserving and reducing the losses is something all utilities can do with the proper teams, dedicated teams, and financing. Another important point of the study is to show that investing in sustainability is profitable, and Sukuk can provide the financing solution for NRW globally. We can venture into green financing. So I would like to end my presentation with a question. What would we do if our water dries up? We take for granted what is most valuable and only regret it once we have lost it. So let us value our water resources and strive to stop the wastage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sayeda, for a very important paper. Unfortunately, wake-up calls are either not paid attention to or paid attention to but too late. The fact that Pakistan is going to be water scarce society by 2025 should be a warning call. And the paper, of course, points to a very important issue. There is a theory out there now that wars are caused by lack of water, especially in the Middle East. Specifically, this theory mentions
Smartphone. Smartphone has the potential to know much more about bank's customer than human advisors know. So this little machine would know more about you than any human person can do. And it can go with you wherever you're going. So Rafi is sitting here right now in Karachi from Malaysia, but his entire thing is in the smartphone. And so is Dr. Zamir, the entire World Bank is moving with him. So banks that will really survive will be those that offer facilities right now as it stands now on the smartphone. So if we are not really smart enough to do our banking on the smartphone, then I think we very soon will become history. There was a survey done in the US which shows that young generation, who they call millennials, how many of them actually visit banks and what are the frequency of visiting the banks. And it's very disappointing to see for people like us who've got a lot of branch network banking that 38% do not visit the branches. So, we spend a lot of money, time, effort setting up big branches, and 38% of the customers would not go to a branch. And then less than one visit per month is 26%. So if you put 26% and 38% together, that's 2/3 of the young population would go to the bank, either not go at all or go less than once a month. So obviously negligible. So only 1/3 would be there, using our branch network, which is not going to be sustainable. And again, this survey, which is called the Millennium Disruption Index, it says that banking is at the highest risk of disruption. Obviously, we've seen a lot of disruption even in the mobile phone, that we no longer have typical cameras or alarm clock or video cameras or a diary. So it's all in there. So maybe one day banking would all be there as well. So according to this index, banking is at the highest risk of disruption. So obviously this Illuminous panel with some practicing chartered accountant firms, 2 CEOs, World Bank expert, we can debate on is it right, or are we getting carried away with this mobile phone technology? I mean, banking will stay as usual. The way our grandfather did banking, we'll still continue to do like that. So maybe we can open up the discussion, and what I would suggest is that initially, because the topic is broken down into 3 parts. The first is, are Islamic banks geared for digital disruption? So I would like each one of you to please maybe spend 2-3 minutes in giving your thought process on that, then maybe you can debate internally as well.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Irfan, for having me on the panel. I think there's no doubt that technology and fintech would be a disruption for the banking. Whether it will happen sooner or later, I think that is yet to be seen. I think the main question probably is that how soon? As you know, that developing countries are still, their financial sector, the banking sector is still quite behind the developed economies. So my guess is that that developing countries can take up on this opportunity and really transform their banking and learn from the developed economies much faster than the other ones. So I think in my view, it would be that it does offer an opportunity and it will be a disruption, but how soon, I'm not very sure about it. Probably not in the short term, but probably in the medium term, you will see some sort of disruption in this particular case. I'm talking about mostly the Islamic banks.
Right, I think some relief that developing countries will take some advantage of this. Let's hear from Junaid.
In fact, when you talk about Islamic banking in Pakistan, I think it is unparalleled with the conventional banks. because we as Islamic banks are providing the same kind of services on the digital front which is being offered by commercial banks. In fact, Bank Islami was the first bank in Pakistan which offered the biometric ATM. State Bank of Pakistan has recently come up with a regulation in July, 2 months back, where they have opened up basically a biometric system to open accounts. Even the telcos who have appointed agents, and there are thousands of agents within the country, they are being used for opening bank accounts for people who are in remote locations. So basically the financial inclusions, which is the biggest challenge in Pakistan, because if you look at the number of people banking versus the total population, it is less than, I think, 30-35%. Among women, it is between 10 to 12%. So there's a huge gap there for financial inclusion and bringing people in public into the banking business. So yes, the disruption definitely is something which is there, but it's unparalleled. And Islamic banks are now I think coming up with solutions on the mobile, because the mobile wallet is the future, as Irfan Sahab said, that one day the banking will be on the mobile, and that is what is happening now. Perhaps Nadeem Hussain, who is a friend of mine, he used to be the CEO of Tamir Bank. He said even the thela wala who's selling fruits, they will be transaction business on the phone rather than cash. So you go and you buy 1 kilo of apple and you can pay him through the mobile. So this is what is happening, and this is basically not too far away from now. So basically that's my take on this.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you look at the disruptive play at a global level for Islamic banking, when Islamic banking started, or Islamic finance started 30, 35 years ago, Islamic finance itself was supposed to be a disruptive play. It was supposed to transform the way banking was done from risk transfer to risk sharing platform. Unfortunately, over the 3 decades, instead of being disruptive, Islamic finance became submissive. It submitted to the norms and ways of conventional banking. So I did not see a disruptive play in any country where Islamic banking has been operating in the last over 3 decades. The reason why the disruptive play did not happen, one, there was state protection for conventional banking. The deposit insurance scheme and the central bank's lender of last resort provide protectionism to banking sector, thereby enabling the banking sector to mobilize deposits at cheap rates, often below inflation rate. The returns are all often below inflation, and the depositors get protection, liquidity, and a return for putting the money in the bank. And the second reason why banking was not was so strong and was not disrupted by Islamic banking is the payment system was also managed. So in order to safeguard the payment system, the government gave the deposit protection. Today, conventional banking is facing the challenge of being disrupted by this industry called fintech. So we saw in the last 10 years, today foreign exchange transactions are not conducted in banks anymore. It's being done by third parties. It could be Western Union, Speedlink. Many others have come to disrupt the norm in banking. So it is cheaper, better, faster, and you don't have to go to a bank to transfer your money. Within seconds, you'll get a code and someone in Indonesia or Pakistan can withdraw the money. Second, we also saw disruption in what we call peer-to-peer lending or marketplace lending. So this is picked up in America, in Europe, and in China, big time. But even peer-to-peer lending with a CAGR of 120, 130% is only 1% of the total lending in the market. And last month, Deloitte produced a very important research in marketplace lending, and they basically refuted the fear that marketplace lending will disrupt banking. They basically say it's rubbish. They say it can probably grow from 1 to 5%, but it will not change. In fact, banks will adapt. They will buy over this platform and offer financing to personal and corporates at a cheaper, better, faster way. And the reason they say why this disruption is not happening, they again bring the same two reasons. One is depositors are safer in banks because they get the deposit protection from the state and the free central bank lender of last resort. Plus, they hijack the payment system. So as long as these two things are considered as part and parcel of banking, basically deposit protection, central bank lender of last resort, and payment system is managed by banks, I don't think there will be much disruption. There could be erosion. For example, previously corporates used to borrow money from the banks. Today in America, 80% of corporate borrowing is done through capital markets. Malaysia, almost 70%. Today, corporates don't come to banks anymore. If they are rated, meaning medium to large corporates are all rated, they will go straight to the capital markets, borrow 1 year money all the way to 20, 25 years. So banks have moved away from lending money to managing capital market instruments. So while disruption is a key concern, as long as these two protections are in place, I don't think it will be a major issue for banks.
Always difficult to speak after Rafi, but I'll pick on a few points. So at EY, what we are seeing is, let's take a step back first, yeah? Why is digital disruption relevant for banks today? Why? Because one, it is going to make transactions incredibly simpler. Two, it's going to make it incredibly affordable, cost effective. And three, it's going to make financial service a lot more accessible, right? I mean, through branchless banking and through other stuff, right? And at the heart of this digital disruption is data. And three areas that we are seeing across different markets which are clearly getting disrupted is wealth management, is payments, and is lending, right? And let me give you a few examples. On wealth management side, till yesterday, it was UBS and the Credit Suisse of the world that were addressing the high net worth individuals. And the minimum ticket size to walk into that bank and ask for a good advice was $1 million, right? Today, you've got the likes of Nutmeg or Betterment or Wealthfront, which are using robo-advisors, i.e. very sophisticated algorithms at the back, to allow me and you to walk in with $100 and get the same kind of advice and same kind of portfolio allocation, right? So wealth management industry is absolutely ripe for disruption, one. Payments, we've already heard enough. TransferWise is another example, right? And a number of central banks today across the world, in GCC, in Pakistan, etc., are doing audits of the remittance business of a number of banks. Why? In a number of different cases, remittance cost to customer was as high as 10% in different charges. That has come down by 80% by fintechs like TransferWise, right? And again, using sophisticated modeling at the back. And third is lending, right? Or financing, right? That is completely getting disrupted as well. Me and you, putting our money in banks, are getting how much return? 0.5%? 1%? Maybe 2, 4 at best, yeah? Beehive. How many of us have heard of Beehive in UAE? Okay, so it's a peer-to-peer lending platform, and it is providing financing to SMEs, right? Anywhere from $25,000 to $125,000 in 7 days' time. And I can invest starting from $100, 100 dirhams in fact, right? And returns, Sharia compliant, right? It's all structuring Sharia compliant, and returns that I'm getting is between 8 and 12%. Where will you get 8 to 12% return and be able to participate? In Pakistan's context, if CPEC comes on board, right, there is going to be a tremendous upside. How can a common man on the street participate, right? That intermediation by banks is getting disrupted, and there are examples. So wealth management, payments, and financing, I would argue, are going to get disrupted big time.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I think generally Islamic finance is predominantly retail banking. Nearly 80% of the assets of Islamic finance are offered by retail bankers. And talking about technology and the advancement of technology, I think it's important for Islamic commercial banks to offer products that's geared to customer groups. And in particular, I'd like to talk more on the younger generation who are very much technology savvy, and their technology is part of their DNA. A study in the United States that defines Generation Y, those who are between 18 to 25, and Generation X between 25 and 50, probably the average of this room. These people emerging as a new power for banking and retail banking in particular. Their annual revenue is around $200 billion. These young people, they have high appetite for financials, and they have their own needs. And I think it's important for Islamic banks to cater for this kind of young people, to try to develop products that will address their needs in education, in entertainment, in saving, help them make a living in our society, like getting married as early as possible, because many people, especially as you know, with these kind of economic downturns, find it difficult to make families. So afford a house, or even if you already have a house, then maintaining your education costs for your children and so on. So I think it's important for retail bankers to focus on customer groups and try to develop products that help them find the way with these difficult times. I think I'll stop here with that points.
Right, I think a good discussion. I never thought that we'll be discussing disruption to the conventional banking industry from Islamic banking. So that was a new perspective which I really picked up during the session. In my own view, I think Islamic conventional bankers do feel the heat of disruption from Islamic banking. Obviously, like we always say that, for example, Kodak went out of business. If they'd gone into digital phone, they probably wouldn't have gone out of business. So most of the conventional banks in Pakistan, at least, we see that they're opening conventional Islamic branches as well. So in order to keep up with that pace, banks are coming towards Islamic so that they don't become obsolete, or they don't face the risk of disruption at the hand of Islamic banking. So I think that was a new facet which I learned, and in Pakistan I see that conventional banks are coming this way, which is good for Islamic banking. But what we should really be careful and beware is that all banks faces the risk of disruption, and I think being Islamic bankers or practicing Islamic banks, we should try to see that that tsunami doesn't come on our counters. So we should stay more focused on innovation, new challenges, customer service, and technology. Like Brother Hatim said that the Millennium X and Millennium Y, there's a big difference in terms of thinking of the younger generation. They don't want to do anything which is not on an iPhone or a internet. Obviously, we still use pen and paper. They don't. So if we can move to the next topic on the brochure, which is innovation and product development. I've been involved with Mizan Bank right from inception 13 years ago. And when we were as small as 10 people and one branch, I always used to say that the success of Islamic banking is that we should be able to have a product for all our customers. As long as the underlying product of a customer is Sharia compliant, we should give them a financing solution. So it's no good for us to tell 50% of the people who come to our counter that, sorry, we don't have a solution for your problem. Otherwise, they'll go to conventional bank. So really, our job as Islamic banker is to not just make the bottom line money, which is obviously very, very, very important, but also to ensure that people stay away from riba. So any customer who comes to us who want to stay away from riba, if we don't give the solution to them, then I think we've lost the battle. We've lost the reason for existence. So, you know, I mean, our existence shouldn't be just, we should be just one more bank on the same street. Our reason should be that people should come and get services in a Sharia compliant manner. So like Taqi Ismail have said in the morning that, you know, so that we stay away from the war with Allah and Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So I think that should be our underlying factor as well. So with that in mind, I would start the discussion with Brother Rafi again, and Junaid as well, being the two CEOs of, practicing CEOs of bank. Rafi has joined recently as the head of CIMB Islamic, which is a very big, probably the biggest window operation in Malaysia, Rafi? Second largest. With Rafi probably it will become the largest, inshallah. And Junaid, who is the country head of Dubai Islamic Bank, which is the, you know, who started the Islamic banking as far as I think the first Islamic bank in the world, right? In the UAE. So with these two people here, maybe they can shed light on how we doing product innovation to make sure that whoever comes to our counter is actually served by an Islamic bank. So Rafi, you want to start?
So I remember this similar question was raised back in 2004 or 2005 in a forum like this in Istanbul. Question is the innovation in Islamic finance real innovation? And my conclusion at that time was the innovation I saw, and I was part of some of the innovation, many of them were imitations. I didn't use the word imitation, I was being polite. I used the word, we were conforming to the conventional products. So instead of lending money to buy a car, Islamic banks will buy the car and sell it on credit terms. But in real economic sense, we have created credit. Credit through loan and credit through sale. So Islam has prohibited money lending, but has permitted credit sale, for example. Now, the reason why Islamic banks were forced to conform to traditional form of credit intermediation is again going back to the subsidy in banking. The banking protection allows banks to mobilize deposit at a cheap rate and offer loans at a very competitive rate. Any other competitor who comes to the market with a differentiated proposition could not challenge the cheaper cost of borrowing loans in the market. So Islamic banks, in order to survive, had to conform. But I basically said in the years to come, Islamic banks have to go to the second stage of improvement. You know, the Japanese started with the 3 I's. First they imitate, then they improve, and then they innovate. The Koreans are doing it very well. The Chinese are doing it very well. So Islamic banks have to move from imitation to improvement. And the improvement can happen through the examples given earlier on the fintech side. So instead of, for example, just giving a credit sale for car financing, we improve on it. We make the credit sale transaction more equitable, more sustainable. For example, suitability test. Today, most Islamic banks will sell the product on a product push basis. You know, the branches, the salesperson will have, okay, you must sell, 10 car loans or car financing this month, 20 credit cards. Everybody goes out and tries to find a customer. Now, what Islamic banks need to do is move towards needs-based or suitability-based proposition. That means you will have a revenue target, but you don't have to sell 20 cards this month. You need to make sure you get X amount of revenue. You interact with the customer, and today the tools are available. Like we saw on the wealth management side, how robo-banking or cognitive banking helps us to provide these services at a most affordable, competitive cost, which we could not even dream of 10 years ago. So we have to improve on the way we sell. Again, our documents are normally more complex than imitation products are supposed to be cheaper and probably look alike, but ours is costlier. How can an imitation product be costlier than the original? The only reason we can still do it is because there is a halal certificate attached to it. So we need to make our product offering a lot more simpler. Customer experience should be better than conventional. So that's where Islamic banks are heading. We improve our product documentation, we improve our customer experience, we improve the disclosure Islamic banks must disclose the real cost of financing. So if you're giving a fixed rate, non-reducing balance for 5 years, you must also educate the customer, provide financial literacy, saying the APR is actually more than the fixed rate. So all these things Islamic banks are actually improving. I see a lot of improvement in that area. The third stage would be the actual innovation. That one I have not seen yet. Now we are seeing, for example, in Pakistan you have the running mudarabas. The overdrafts are being done on a mudaraba basis. Now I have not seen the product, but if you actually use global standards on disclosure, I doubt you'll be able to do the product here. I have not seen the product, but based on what I've seen in many markets, if you reduce the disclosure standard, then you can do. The moment you increase the disclosure standard, the cost of audit and due diligence goes up, the product becomes less competitive in the market. So this is the trend I see in innovation in the market today.
Well, as my Sharia advisor, Dr. Hussain Hamid, he says that in conventional bank there are just two products, which is deposits and loan. But in Islamic bank, there are many products. You have got Musharaka, Mudarba, Ijara, Musawama, Salam, you name it. And in terms of innovation, once I went to him requesting him to structure a finance for somebody who was in gold trading. And he said, I don't have a product, but if you give me 24 hours, I'll have to go through a few books and I can come out with a product. You can do in gold. Although gold is a cash-like transaction, but still, he said that there are ways that you can innovate and come up with a structure. So in terms of the Islamic banking, the product range is tremendous, and customers can come and choose. Yes, the telcos and the branches banking, which has come in Pakistan, is very strongly. They have really revolutionized this product innovation. Now we can see that small people, an illiterate person who is having, see, the mobile is in the hand of almost everybody. So they can do transaction through their mobile. Not only they can open an account through a very simple apps which is available now. They can do fund transfers. They can send money from one city to another city, from city to villages to their home. These have all come through the innovation in the telcos and the branches banking. Even now the Takaful is plugged into this in the apps, wherein you can buy a small shop which is doing which is selling bakala or a repair shop. They want to insure their outlet. They can do it Takaful for a small amount, going through the app, and you don't have to go to insurance company. So this innovation and product development is a continuous process. But in Islamic banking, in my belief, that we have got much more range of products to offer as opposed to the conventional bank. And then obviously it's not the end, but things are coming up now. And for instance, the payment, we have a Benazir income support plan. So people in villages, they get that money through mobile apps now. P2G, person to government, you can pay their challan or their taxes through the mobile. So these innovations are coming in, but obviously there will be lots that we'll be seeing in times to come.
I like the 3 I's which Rafi used. Imitate first, like the Chinese did, improve and then innovate. So, from 3 I's, how many people have heard of terminology, COBM? It's terminology called COBM. COBM is cost of being a Muslim, right? So you tell a customer who comes to you, I mean, most of our, unlike Dr. Hatim said that in Middle East, probably Islamic banks are more focused towards consumer borrowing. In Pakistan, it's predominantly corporate sector, which is actually the taker of the money. So the depositors are individuals, mashallah, very well diversified individual base for all the banks. But the bulk of the money is going to the corporate sector. Now you go to a corporate and you try to tell them that, we will charge you 0.0001% more because it's Islamic, they will not come to you. And they'll give you a reason that because the market is so competitive, the world is going through one direction, if we pay you more, we'll become non-competitive for our, the end product which we are selling will become more expensive. So you end up actually competing in the same market. Now, here I have got a very contrarian view as a practitioner myself, that if we try to bring in a product which is tangentially different from if it's not a look-alike from a conventional banking product, Islamic banking will not take off, because the customer will never be able to understand it. They do talk about that we want to be Sharia compliant, and obviously that is our core of all the Islamic banks in Pakistan, to make it Sharia compliant. But the magic, I feel, is when you're able to provide them the services which they want at similar kind of pricing level. If the pricing is different, nobody will come to you, generally. And when I say nobody, the big chunk of the customers will not come to you. So really, we are in that dilemma of making product which, where we talk about risk sharing. You go to a top tier corporate and you tell them you want to share the risk and the rewards as well, they will say, no, we are a very sound business house, we make a lot of money, but we don't want to share with you. We just want to pay a very small rate, whatever the profit rate is, Kibor plus 0.5%, Kibor plus 1%, and that's about it. So no profit sharing. On the other hand, some of our customers feel that the rates which we are paying, again, like you said, 0.5%, 1%, 2%. So I was in a function at Darul Uloom Karachi, where which is headed by Maulana Taqi Ismaili Sahib, and there was a group of individuals who were running very successful businesses as well. So they were complaining to me that our rates are very low. So I said, yeah, great. I said, now we'll go and make a product where we'll put your money into high risk projects. But I said that, would you be prepared to take losses? They said, no losses. So you see, these are the people, if they say no losses, how can we develop a product in any market in which the returns will be higher? You try to do musharka, obviously, you've got accountability with your depositors, that they've put money with Mizan Bank, with DIB, with Bank Islami, because it's a bank. And tomorrow we tell them that, we put your money in a musharka product, and the guy never came back. So the first time we saw him was when he came to the bank, and the last time we never saw him again. So it's history. So obviously, in initial phases of Islamic banking, we need to be extremely careful in terms of how we carry on that duty of care and of the intermediary role. So in my own view, humble ways, maybe it's gone a little bit away from the topic, is in economics there's a very strong concept of law of arbitrage, that if you sell something which is very cheap, you'll go bankrupt. If you sell something very expensive, you'll again go bankrupt. Because if you sell very cheap, everybody will come to you and crowd you out. If you're expensive, nobody will come to you. So I think Islamic banks have to play that balancing act of making sure that we do look at risk taking as well, risk sharing, but at the same time, obviously keeping our depositors at the very central of our focus, because our accountability, I would say, is not to our shareholders, because they only invest about 8% of the total balance sheet, typically. So 92% of the money comes from the depositors. So the depositor interest has to be paramount. So I think with that, we move to our third topic.
In fact, Irfan sir, if
Yeah.
I can disrupt.
Sorry, yeah, carry on.
I can disrupt.
Yeah.
So product innovation I can understand, right? I mean, and we are talking to different banks around in different markets. Product innovation I can understand, you've got to be conservative, and it does come mainly from the banks themselves, right? But what about other forms of innovation? And I've not heard enough about collaborative models, right? I mean, because again, service innovation and distribution innovation, etc., are not going to all come from inside the bank. Is that change of business model something that banks are looking at? I mean, do you see yourself collaborating with 15 fintechs 10 years down the road? The definition of Mizan or Dubai Islamic will be a conglomerate of 15 fintechs, each a specialist in their own area.
Okay.
A very different mindset than what it is today.
Yeah.
Eventually this
Yes.
will happen.
Uh-huh.
So if you look at the Beehive or the Lending Club model, what it has done is, for the group of people you met in Darul Uloom, you can actually give them this Beehive or Lending Club model where they can choose up to 200, 300 companies or personal to give financing to with a minimum ticket of $25, 100 dirhams in Dubai. And you can have a range of credit from triple A to single B, and you can choose. So with the diversification, you're giving them like a portfolio, and there's no cost to the savers. So these things, eventually I think banks will buy out. So I'm pretty sure Lending Club already teamed up with Citigroup.
Yeah.
So you find Beehive will probably team up with DIB. So
Are
that
we seeing enough of that happening at Islamic banks, or
I
is it
think
still a
banks
while away?
today
Yeah.
have awakened to this challenge. They realize that there would be erosion of this business, but it will not completely dispose the deposit. People will still want, because what happened in Beehive and Lending Club and all the marketplace lending, there's no liquidity. So you can put your money in 200 corporates and you get 8 to 12% return. If you want cash suddenly, you have to go and find somebody to sell it to, and often the secondary market you lose 30%, sometimes 50%, depending on how desperate you are to sell. So it's not going to replace entirely the deposit. Maybe 10, 20% of the deposit will move from banks to, but banks would like to be in that new.
So you would
asset.
see that collaborative model coming
Absolutely.
in play.
We are already looking towards it.
Right.
Right, so we move on to the third one, which is the Islamic banks of future. And again, I would request Dr. Zamir, with the US knowledge of futuristic part of the world, to see what Islamic banking would look like in terms of branches or the banks as a whole. Which way would they be going versus the conventional banking? And maybe Rafi, you can also add on to that as well. So please.
Thank you. Thank you, Irfan. If I, with your permission, if I could maybe change the question, rather than focusing on Islamic banks, I could change it to Islamic finance.
Sure.
I think I'm more optimistic about Islamic finance than Islamic banks. And the reason I will probably explain to you, I'm sure most of you have, these PCs, personal computers and laptops, and you may have seen there is a, most of these have a certain tag on it, says Intel Insight, which means that you have a computer, you have this whole desktop or a laptop, but the main thing is that Intel is inside, the chip which works, which drives it, is inside. So I think the way I see the future finance with the Islamic finance insight, which means that you will see a full-fledged Islam kind of a financial system, but the core contracts, the core financial intermediation, the core way of doing finance would be mostly likely contracts of Islamic finance, which will be more of risk sharing, asset based or fully by asset backed, based on trade and those things. So I do kind of think the future would be on these lines, and we already see some of these things happening through these collaborative models, this peer-to-peer lending, creating this whole ecosystem. Now, I'm just going to justify this kind of a view why I think it is like this. Remember that why banks exist. Banks exist because the intermediate and the depositor have a delegated monitoring to them. And why banks are superior to do a delegated monitoring? Because they have superior information. And where do they get the information? They get the information because they have a dealing with a client on the asset side and all this thing. Now look what technology is doing with massive kind of digital platforms. You'll be surprised that right now the biggest kind of a war on Wall Street, other thing is going on, that all these Amazons and the Rokotus and the eBays and all this thing, they are basically working on creating this digital platform where they could capture all this information about all the people who are dealing with them, whether they are on the customer side, whether they are on the lender side or borrower side, or maybe these SMEs who are maintaining their inventories. They know all their information, how good is their inventory, how good is their payments record, how good is the credit worthiness, all sort of thing is available to them in that digital platform. So what these companies are doing basically, that now they're capturing on this, you may have heard this thing of called big data. So they are basically developing these algorithms that how to go through this big data and come up with a more predictable credit score, more predictable enabling better information which can enable peer-to-peer lending, or we can enable even giving the credit by these digital platforms. So I think what I do see is that financial intermediation itself will change. That will change, and that will because of this massive information which will remove the traditional information asymmetry which was basically allowing a debt-based risk shifting contracts, and they will promote more toward the asset-based and risk-sharing contracts. So in that sense, I think we should see a future with an Islamic finance insight as a running engine for the financial intermediation, and rest of the platform will continue with many more innovations.
Thank you. Rafi, you want to?
When I look at the future of banking, what I see is in probably 10, 20 years' time, the existing form of banking will not exist. This is my humble view. The existing regulatory framework is becoming more and more complex, that it will reach a stage where it will be beyond management. If you look at Basel III, I was fortunate to meet Dato Paduka Andrew Sheng, a very good friend of Prof. Abbas. He was one of the drafters of Basel III, and in one discussion he said he has worked on Basel I and II and III. He said he doesn't understand fully Basel III. That's the reality. If you look at the complexity that banks are now put through, from liquidity coverage ratio to leverage ratio to NSFR, and all kind of ratios have come up, and you need complex system to compute. On top of that, the regulator is asking for a resolution and recovery plan. It's a living will. If I have to close shop tomorrow, this is who I'm going to sell and this is how I'm going to liquidate. Now, the amount of effort, it takes 3 years to come up with a resolution plan, and the world changes in a year. The whatever recovery plan you put in place may not be even functional next year, let alone have a, who's going to buy? I mean, the regulator may not approve. So you find that banks are being asked to do so many things which will reach a point where it will be beyond their capacity, and they will just say no need deposit insurance. This is the reason why central bank is imposing all this, is because there is a deposit insurance and central bank lender of resort. So what we like to see is the technology will improve. We should be able to educate the population to say, if you want deposit protection, don't expect return. If you want protection, no return. It's just like saying, I don't want to go to work, but give me a salary. Who is going to give you a salary for not coming to work? So if you're not putting your deposit to work and take risk, then you should not get any return. So
In fact,
this goes back to
some banks
Wadia.
In fact, some banks are deducting amount, right? I mean,
In Japan, for example, you have to pay for keeping your deposit.
you have to pay.
Actually, the word deposit should not be used anymore. Like our brother was saying, it's a deposit and a loan. Actually, it's a loan and a loan. When you put deposit in a bank, you are lending money to the bank. That's a legal contract. Although you don't sign a loan contract with the bank, legal definition in all common law countries is that your deposit is a loan, not secured to a bank, but the central bank gives you deposit protection and lender of last resort. So I think with the advancement of technology, we can actually have a model like Beehive and Lending Club, where you choose, you want return, you choose the type of financing that you want to invest in, automatically Mudaraba develops. So I think the future would be more towards Mudaraba or investment accounts, and the central bank will not give deposit protection. And if you still want protection, keep your money. You may have to pay zakat because if it fulfills the requirement. And you will be forced to put your money in investment accounts where there is no protection on your investment. This should be the future.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the size of the industry. It took us nearly 40 years to reach 1.8, or let's just say arguably 2 trillions. And some of the industry reports, they're saying that hopefully by the next 4 years, it will be 6 trillion. And I know they always put us on this challenge. We need to reach that figure. I remember 6 years ago when Moody's first, they said the industry is about $900 billion. So when they celebrated the one figure, 1 trillion. So in 6 years' time, we almost doubled. But I'm asking a question. Do you think that innovation, technology can help the industry to increase the capacity of the Islamic finance in the next 4 years or so, to 20? Is that realistic to reach 5 trillions in 4 years? Unless we do something drastically different. And I think technology is the best way. We need to, reaching the mass can only be by developing products that's generic for everybody, not only for Muslims. What is the percentage of non-Muslims that use Islamic financial products, whether it's in the takaful side, capital markets, or commercial banking? It's still very, very negligent. So this question is for all of us. How can we reach this 5 trillion using the technology and innovation? Are the Islamic banking institutions investing enough in brains? Do they have product innovation incubators, like people to improve their expertise mindset? Or are we hiring people from conventional side, just as Rafi was saying, just to imitate? We need brains, otherwise it's just going to be talk.
So I think that's a very important point, if I can, right? Talking about what the Islamic Bank of the future is going to look like, and therefore what kind of talent we will need. And I would concur as well that Islamic Bank of the future will be based on two aspects. One is data, and the other one is customer experience. And Rafa alluded to customer experience earlier as well.
Yes.
But what is customer experience? How many of us are very excited about mortgage? I bet not many, right? But we are excited about home buying journey. How many banks today are talking about home buying journey and not just selling mortgages, right? As a result, there's an implication on talent as well. It's not good enough for scholars, for product specialists to just know about the Sharia side of product development. New sciences like data science, right, is absolutely critical. For example, EY is today looking to hire 100 data scientists in Pakistan, right? And that's the mandate that we have. We can't find enough, right? People who understand, have the domain knowledge, and who are data scientists as well. So Islamic Bank of the future really is all going to be about data and customer experience, and therefore we have to bring together the Sharia expertise together with the new sciences.
Right, I think very interesting points, like Intel inside. Hope one day these cameras which are taking the picture would say Islamic finance inside. But obviously Islamic Bank of the future, it will require both the banks coming forward in terms of technology, development, and whatever. I think one other thing which is really helping is the availability of information now generally as to what Islam is all about, which, in my own view started with 9/11. That people started getting to know what the religion is about, why is it haram, why is it halal. So at one end, we have to push it to our customers. The other side is the customers who really want to come and understand that what they were not doing before. I think a lot of us were not aware of what Islamic finance was, and now, mashallah, we are practicing this. So both things would help. The banks getting more efficient, which they have to be in any case, whether conventional or Islamic. And I think the knowledge base of our young generation is also getting better day by day. So both coupled together, we hope we have a more vibrant Islamic banking. So I think if we can close our discussion from the panel at this side and maybe spend just 10 minutes on Q&A. So I would request if the questions, if any, if they are brief, and you can please address it to whoever you like on the panel. So please carry on. Any mic anywhere? जी बताइए आप I'll repeat. तो जल्दी ले आइए प्लीज आप. क्वेश्चन प्लीज पूछ लें तो आई थिंक बी.
Got it. So bank basically knows the customer journey. They have this data available. How to use it for the for customer experience and developing new products. How they develop new products? Because I think you people and the Sharia people can address this issue, the lack of products and the compromises so far made by the Islamic banks to really be commercial and competitive with the commercial banks.
I think your question is how the banks would be using data. Ashar, is perhaps you want to?
No, going forward. Sorry.
I'll just finish it out and then
हाँ,
you
अगर
can
question
address.
please पूछ लें
There is
because-
a one point I was thinking, and we have been thinking and developed something on it. Addressing the asset side of the balance sheet is through addressing the ecosystem of different industries. For example, if we take a supply chain of a car manufacturing from vendor to manufacturer to dealer to showroom and to the customer, and thereafter managing it for 5 years, because it's an asset of an Islamic bank for 5 years. How it is maintained.
I'm sorry, I'll have to interpret question अगर आप पूछ लें please because we need to
Just
move on.
sorry,
जी.
sorry. Just that this asset side can be addressed through the addressing the ecosystem of the different industries.
Yeah, thank you so
That's
much.
my comment.
Any other question? ये प्लीज बेटे माइक आप देख लिया करें चारों तरफ जी carry on.
Thank you for your talk. My question is actually related to the non-intermediation side of income of the banks. Like Mr. Rafi has mentioned that now we are moving from purely intermediation to managing capital market instruments, right? Which is a fee-based thing, okay? Not purely intermediation. So how do you see it growing? You know, a non-funded income throughout, like Malaysian experience as well as Pakistani experience. If sir want to share, thank you.
Rafi. I think by one.
Generally, you see in the beginning, Sukuk, you used to get 35 cents in terms of fees. Today, you'll be very lucky to get 5 cents, 5 basis points for the entire deal size. So the deal, although the deal size and the market size is growing, the fee is being compressed. So you always have to innovate, bring new instruments so the fees will be higher, and then it basically goes down. What I see generally among Islamic banks, the composition of non-finance income is average about 10-15%, whereas conventional banks can get 25 to 30%. Am I right? I don't know. Yeah. So conventional banks seems to be able to do much better in non-finance income because operating accounts are normally in the conventional banks. So FX, rates, and other type of services are normally channeled to the conventional account. So it is challenging.
It also depends on the supply and demand. See, if the supply side of the liquidity is more, then obviously the pricings are very, very tight, and the competitions are there. Because all the Islamic conventional banks, they have got the win there. I'm talking about from Pakistan perspective. So, for instance, we have got scarcity of sukuk because not many assets with the government. So when they come up with the sukuk, there's a lot of supply. Liquidity is chasing the sukuk. So we have the example where one sukuk was priced at T-2, sukuk 15. So just imagine that the industry, the conventionals they can buy and they can go and deploy their liquidity at T-bills at X percentage, but when it comes to Islamic, it is T-2. So, yeah, T-2, and this is 3 years paper, so you have to sit with them, and that is repriced every 6 months. So with the discount rate going down, the pricing keeps coming down. So these are the challenges there, but yes, NFI is basically the key, but there also it's very, 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 very complex, very compressed.
Right, can we take one more question, please? Ji, carry on.
One lady.
Hi, my name is Junaid. I have a question to Mr. Irfan Siddiqui Saab. You call it disruption, but when we see it in a broader perspective, it doesn't happen to be a disruption at all. It's basically the change in the business model of banking primarily. When it comes to the innovation, I just want to ask you, being the head of one of the premier Islamic bank, what innovative products you have offered to the industry? If I, being a consumer, just need a car on dimension Musharaka, can I get it from elsewhere in the entire industry? Is the one question. If I need a couple of other things, like a cell phone as well. So can I get it on a diminishing musharaka like this from the industry? So my question is, so what sort of innovation you have offered to the customer when it comes to the customer centricity? The thing is that we have worked a lot on our own perspective. The banking sector has worked towards their own ends, not towards being a customer-centric organization. So what would you say on that? Thank you.
I think almost all the Islamic banks in Pakistan, Mizan included, DIB, Bank Islami, they all have product range which starts from a very small financing. Some of them, Junaid Sahab was explaining over lunch that they have a product for consumer finance as well. What do you call it?
Yeah, running Musharka.
Running Musharka. Mizan has got a laptop financing scheme right up to we can finance, big dimes for 15 years for 25 billion rupees as well. So I think there's no dearth of instruments available. Obviously, if you want to ask about specific instances of what instruments are available, I think all I can assure you that between the four Islamic banks, every single product which you can even think of, it's covered. How it's covered, probably that will require a more deeper explanation, and I think there's a counter outside for all the banks, DIB, Mizan, Bank Islami. Maybe you can visit there. They've got brochures as well. But every single product is available. I think that you need to have a one-to-one conversation. Wouldn't be appropriate right now to.
You can have a car on a diminishing musharka or ijara.
Yeah.
On the rental. So you can have. Not a problem. That is
it's like Junaid Sahab said, it's available.
this ijara is the substitute of diminishing car. You pay the rental.
Right. I think I'm getting a message from the organizer, Mr. Raza, that time is over and.
There's one sister.
Huh?
She's been asking.
One
for that.
sister?
One sister.
Okay.
Please.
कहाँ है? जी बताइए.
Sir, I wanted to ask about this influx of technology. We are saying that this will make banking products cheaper, faster, better. But do you think that there are some risks in the future that Islamic banks or the system may be exposed to because of this increase in mobile Islamic banking, for example? Maybe theft or the fast pace or any other risks that they should be aware of?
I think obviously life is full of risk. More technology sometimes mean more risk as well. If you use the technology in the right manner, it actually reduces your risk as well. So inshallah, the hope is that the world is growing, we're all growing. So without technology, we cannot grow. So we have to use the technology. It's a double-edged sword. And we need to make sure that as we go along, we have enough checks and balances to make sure that that technology actually works in the favor of the bank rather than against the bank. So I think with that fear, I would really like to end up this session with thanks to everybody and with the dua that what our sister is saying, that Islamic banks are actually protected from all problems, and inshallah they prosper till eternity, inshallah.
I just have to make one announcement for the benefit of people sitting here that DIB has launched an advanced certificate in UFE Sharia standards in collaboration with IBA and C. And this unique course is designed to provide extensive knowledge to industry on human resources, especially Islamic banking fund, regarding essential Sharia standards principle in different Islamic mode of financing. So that is something which is available with IBA.
Excellent. I think this was a very informative, very interesting session, and especially started by Mr. Irfan Siddiqui, who presented this video like a seasoned presenter. So thank you very much, all the seasoned speakers, for this very interesting talk. And now I would request our volunteers to please get alert. And I request Irfan Siddiqui Saab, who is the chairman of this session, to please present these plaques to our speakers. The first plaque to Mr. Zamir Iqbal. Dr. Zamir Iqbal, please. Mr. Junaid Ahmed, CEO, Dubai Islamic Bank, he will collect his plaque from Mr. Irfan Siddiqui. To follow him, Mr. Rafi Muhammad Hanif, a young CEO. Then we have Mr. Ashar Nazim, again a young man. Dr. Hatim Al Tahir. We have to retake. The scene was lost. And I request Dr. Abbas Mirakhor to please come on the stage. You have to present this plaque to Mr. Irfan Siddiqui. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, here we conclude the third session of the day. We break for tea. This is a short break, just 15 minutes. We have to be back at 15 to 5 so that we can start the last session of the day. Thank you. Thank you very much.